Hi everyone, welcome. I'm Annalisa from C.A.C. Global Solutions. I hope you're all doing great. This is video number 3 on the book Introduction to Aircraft Management. In this video today, I'm here with Bret, and we are going to talk about a few topics that we discuss in the book from an inspector point of view. So Bret, welcome. And let's dive in with the first question. So in the book, we talk about situations where aircraft has a defect or a repair that is out of limits, and the interactions between the worthiness organization, the operator, the TC holder, and the authority. Can you talk about that and give us a definition of out of limits and the role of the authority?
Sure, thanks, Annalisa. So obviously, there's so many different scenarios that dictate what out of limits are, and there are just so many cases that you can't define them all in one conversation. Every scenario is different, right? But the first thing you have to do is we have to define what is out of limits. So when a type certificate holder makes application for a new type certificate, they're required to submit instructions for continuing airworthiness. These usually take the form of maintenance manual, structural repair manual, and many other documents to support the aircraft while it's in service. As part of these instructions for continuing airworthiness, they include the criteria for damage. So in there will be allowable limits for damage, and there will be in some instances, they simply won't speak to a type of damage that you find. So there are a couple different instances where you have to approach the type certificate holder for additional information. So type certificate holder data, instructions for continuing airworthiness, in the criteria that they lay out, they'll usually refer to damage as negligible, so you can allow the aircraft to remain in service with that damage. They may specify different criteria for different types of damage, dents, corrosion, whatever, or in a lot of cases, they're silent. Um, Beyond limits or out of limits refers to if something is not negligible, um, if there's a criteria and the damage exceeds that
Mm-hmm.
criteria, or if the type certificate holder simply didn't address type of damage, these all need to be addressed by the type certificate holder or by an approved design organization. And we'll
Mm-hmm.
talk about that a little bit.
Yeah.
It's important to understand that damage being out of tolerance doesn't necessarily refer to physical damage, dents, cracks, corrosion, whatever the case might be. It also refers to falling outside of the manufacturer's specified maintenance requirements. So, for instance, if an aircraft is parked and the manufacturer, the type certificate holder, specifies certain actions that are supposed to be
Mm-hmm.
accomplished and they're not, now that's a damaged aircraft. And in order to bring the aircraft back into a serviceable state, the type certificate holder has to be involved to determine what actions need to be accomplished in order to make the aircraft serviceable again. So the process, the first thing that happens when you sustain damage to an aircraft or you determine that the aircraft's been damaged is the operator or the owner has to make a determination on what do we do about this, right? So the way they do that is within the operator or the owner, they have an airworthiness management group or person. That person's responsible for determining what they need to do to put the aircraft back into a serviceable state. So the way they do that is, of course, first you look for already approved data.
Mm-hmm.
So is there a maintenance manual action that can be accomplished, or is there a repair, for instance, in the structural repair manual? And if there is, what they'll do is they'll plan that action. They'll issue work orders, and they'll have their maintenance group or their maintenance provider perform the action, make a record of it in the technical record of the aircraft, release the aircraft to service, and you're back on the road again.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, what happens where the problem lies is, of course, if there's no approved data referenced in the maintenance manual or the structural repair manual, now you've got to figure out, okay, what do we follow, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this is where the airworthiness management person or group contacts the type certificate holder or a design
Mm-hmm.
organization, design approval organization or a design engineer representative, depending on really on the regulatory structure that you're working under for the maintenance of the aircraft. So the type certificate holder or the design approval organization will always come back to the airworthiness management person or group with some sort of proposed repair scheme. Okay, so when they do that, if it's the type certificate holder, that's great. That's considered approved data, and the airworthiness management person can take that. They can plan what needs to be done. They can have maintenance accomplish it, and then the aircraft can be returned to service. Now, if they go the route where they're employing a design approval organization, that can be a little trickier because not all authorities readily recognize design approval organization. Particularly, for instance, if you're dealing with a Boeing and you have an FAA design approval organization make a repair scheme for it, in the FAA world, that could be quite acceptable. But in the EASA, that may not be enough. They may want to give it their own approval. Some of the smaller authorities in the overseas territories or San Marino, very much the same way. They can't, although they're not on their own certification authorities, they don't just readily accept approval data from anybody but the type certificate holder. So that can be a little bit of an issue sometimes. So as far as the authority's role goes, if approved data exists, type certificate holder exists, or you obtain type certificate holder data, the authority usually doesn't have much involvement in restoring the aircraft back to a serviceable state. But if repair data is not type certificate holder data, as I mentioned, some authorities, they want to give it their own approval, or at least not necessarily an approval, but they at least want to accept it for use on their registered aircraft, simply to make sure that the standard that the aircraft is being maintained to and the data that's being used are a match. Okay, so that's typically what happens. And in a lot of cases, they actually require submission of applications to have that data accepted. So that's something that some people need to keep in mind, because if you're working on an aircraft of a foreign register, the rules can very well be different than what you're used to working with, right? So, okay. One area that you run into real issues with is what happens if the type certificate holder or design approval organization gives you a repair scheme and they want something accomplished and it simply can't be done, right? And we saw this a lot with aircraft that have been parked for a long time. They were parked never with the intention of leaving for too long, but with recent world events, they ended up being stranded in different locations. Unfortunately, a lot of maintenance came due, didn't get accomplished, so hence there's a damaged aircraft. So even when the type certificate holder provides actions that need to be required, if you can't accomplish them, well, that's an issue, right? So in instances like that, again, the airworthiness management person or organization would need to contact their responsible authority and in all likelihood make application for a special flight permit. And so in what that would look like is okay, the aircraft is damaged. The type certificate holder may suggest that certain actions, if accomplished, they would support a special flight permit. And one thing that we come across that I think is well worthy of noting is if you get type certificate holder data that supports a repositioning flight, a ferry flight, that's not an approval to do that. You still, and all of these documents that the type certificate holders give you, they all include a statement that says you must obtain approval from your local regulatory authority. And that's an important one because type certificate holder may say, do these actions, you're good to fly. That does not make the aircraft legal to fly, right?
Of course. And I think we've seen a lot of these cases with transition aircraft. You touched a little bit on it. Can you talk about these transition aircraft, what they are, and what is the approach from a civil aviation perspective?
So by transition aircraft, what we're referring to are aircraft that are transiting from one register onto another register. And the most likely scenario where you'll find that is with leased aircraft that are the leases are coming to an end for one reason or another. Airlines can fall over, or I mean leases end just
Mm-hmm.
by calendar. So there are many different scenarios where this can happen, but typically to have an aircraft on a register, there are eligibility requirements for the owner or the operator. And once the lease comes to an end and you no longer have legal possession of that aircraft, it can't stay on the register anymore. So the lessor or the owner, they need to put it somewhere while they figure out what to do with it next. So they transit the aircraft off one register, so it would be exported from the country that it's currently being operated on,
Mm-hmm.
and they would transfer it to another register where, I mean, it may be the next register where the aircraft is actually going to operate, or it might just be for interim purposes until they figure out where the aircraft's going to go, right? So that's typically what a transition aircraft is. Now, the authority's role in transition aircraft, um, there are a number of just different aspects about them. Um, So, from an authority's perspective, our involvement can be, well, every project's different, right? So, from the authority, from the state of register that the aircraft is coming off from, they may issue a certificate of airworthiness for export, or an export airworthiness certificate, or they may not. It depends on the state of the aircraft, of course, right? I mean, some of the aircraft are just finishing their leases. They've been in service. They have valid certificates of airworthiness, and the airworthiness has been under the control of a continuing airworthiness management organization,
Mm-hmm.
and everything's great. Those are the easy ones, typically. Where we have run into a lot of problems recently is with the COVID crisis and all of the lockdowns and everything. A lot of airlines have fallen over. A lot of aircraft have been stuck in locations where they've just been left and no maintenance has been accomplished. And it's not necessarily that the owners or lessors didn't want to do maintenance. I mean, in a lot of instances, you simply couldn't
Mm-hmm.
find maintainers to get to the aircraft, and if you could, they can't get to the aircraft, right?
Yeah.
So that's been an issue. So from an importing authority's perspective, that creates a lot of challenges, right? So we're very interested in the condition of the aircraft, the state of the aircraft, the whether it was in a controlled environment and such. And um, that's probably the biggest part of bringing an aircraft onto a register is making sure that it meets all of the requirements. Um, these aren't operating aircraft typically, so you can kind of overlook some of the operational requirements, operational equipment requirements being met, but the aircraft still has to be serviceable and
Mm-hmm.
airworthy. So there are a number of different things we look at, and every situation is different, but they all have to be evaluated. The big thing is the airworthiness group, the airworthiness management people. They have to propose a plan on what the plan is for bringing the aircraft on, and what they intend to do to make sure that it's serviceable. And we have to accept that plan. If they don't come to us with a plan, and their plan is just, we don't figure that it's sufficient enough to cover all of the aspects that we are concerned about. Obviously, we're going to have problems, and you need certifications to fly the aircraft and to bring it onto a register and such. So yeah, it's going to be a job.
Okay, perfect. I have a question for you. So I have experienced that. So sometimes you have operators or maintainers or maybe a lessor that take action on something. Maybe they go directly to a maintainer or they go directly to the type certificate holder to ask something without going through ask the evaluation of the airworthiness management
Right.
organization. So what do you think about these cases?
What do I think about them?
Yeah.
It's a challenge. It really is, because the airworthiness management organization, or the people or person that are in charge of airworthiness management, um, they're most they have the biggest challenges, because what we see is an owner or an operator will input the aircraft because they have facilities that they deal with, and they have on-site representatives that monitor the aircraft from their perspective, but they're not in place to make sure that all of the airworthiness requirements from a regulatory perspective are accomplished. And so that kind of bypasses or it can bypass the situation. And unfortunately, typically what happens is the owners or operators, they're the ones that hold the contract with the maintenance providers. So the maintenance providers, on the other hand, are looking at the owners and operators as the ones paying the checks,
Mm-hmm.
and they're paying more attention to them than they are the airworthiness
Yeah.
management group. But as a regulator, and I mean, this is more in the EASA realm and some of the overseas territory realms, but it's a regulatory requirement that airworthiness management is in place, and that they have to be the ones that are making sure that compliance is met. And if you're cutting them out of the loop, then you can't guarantee that compliance is being met, and that's an issue.
Can the authority help these organizations? Because I know I've been there, and it's a very
Right.
difficult position to be in. And as much as you try to explain things to people, sometimes the message doesn't go through. So can the
But
authority help these organizations? Or because
well,
I suppose that maybe a camo can see their approval taken, maybe because they are not able to fulfill their duties and responsibilities.
well, yes and no. I mean, um, does the authority get involved? Absolutely. I mean, if I mean, we try to have close working relationships with the entities that we're dealing with, the owners, operators, the airworthiness management organizations, and the maintainers. And if any one of them is having issues with the other, I mean, we've had maintainers take issue with owners, pushing them for different things, and we've had airworthiness management groups um, take issue with maintainers taking it upon themselves to do things. And absolutely, like, we'll pick up the phone, and we'll have a conversation, and we'll try to bring everybody back on the same page. It's about trying to have a collaborative approach to things,
Hmm.
right? But yeah, there can be issues. I mean, if a camo, if an airworthiness management organization um, steps back and allows the operator to just deal directly with the maintainer, and chooses to turn a blind eye, yeah, they're not fulfilling their duty,
Hmm.
and the authority may have something to say about that. And of course, I mean, even with a maintainer, certificate action is always a possibility. But I mean,
An
that's
extreme
pretty
one.
blatant. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Well, perfect. Thank you very much. So again, the book is called Introduction to Aircraft Management. It's going to be released in April, the 10th of April, and it's going to be available on Amazon as a paperback, hardcover, and ebook. And it's also going to be available on Apple iBooks. So if you guys are going to buy it, please let us know what you think. Leave us a review, a comment. We really want to know what you guys think about the topic, and what you would like to know more about this topic. Um, Please keep in mind that this is an introduction to aircraft management, and the reason why I specify this is because the topic is just massive. There are so many things that we can say, many examples, cases, scenarios, and one book is not enough to cover all of them. So maybe one day we'll write other books, but for now, this is an introduction. And we really hope that it's going to help you understand better aircraft management, the different duties and responsibilities, the different moving parts of it. Aircraft management is not a one-person job. It has to be a collaborative effort from a flight operations perspective, airworthiness and maintenance management perspective. There are lots of pieces to it, so it's more complex than you would think. So this is just the first step for us. This book, Introduction to Aircraft Management, we only scratched the surface. We are already working on the next step, and we are very excited about it. It's a little early to share details, but we will in the near future, so stay tuned. Thank you very much for watching this video and the other two. Stay tuned and bye for now. Thank you.